First of all, where in Myanmar did you go exactly? And why specifically there?
We went to a state in eastern Myanmar on the Thai border called Kayah State.
Mm-hmm.
It's the smallest state of the states that in Myanmar's east coast.
Okay.
And we went there because the rebel forces have had pretty good success against the military, and they now claim that they control 90% of the countryside. And so we wanted to just check the status of their war effort, and also in kind of the space that they've created for themselves. They're trying to create a state government to both, service the needs of their citizens in Kayah, many of whom are displaced by the fighting, but also to serve as a model of federal democracy, which is this kind of this idea of you have a central government and then more power sharing in the ethnic areas along Myanmar's east and west coasts.
Now, I don't want to sound crass here, but isn't it in some ways trading military rule by the junta for trading military rule? I mean, trading the military rule of the junta for the military rule of a rebel ethnic group?
So the rebels, the area that we went to,
Yeah.
the main rebel group KNDF, they have a wider support from the civilians than the junta ever have had in those areas. The junta basically though they had the rules and all of those on paper, they never had implemented a fair governance, especially in ethnic areas. So because of that reason, the rebels have much wider support from almost all the ethnic groups in those in Kayah State. So there's a difference between the level of support that the two governing forces have had. Furthermore, the KNDF, the policies, at least as Jim said, on paper, they're pretty much open to. They don't want to call themselves an ethnic armed group. They want to call them basically kind of like their policy. On paper, they are policy based, which encourage even the majority Burmese who basically control the whole country throughout the military and the governance. But the younger Burmese people to leave leave Yangon and the Burmese areas and come and join the rebel forces to fight or to work as doctors or otherwise, simply because of their policies.
This is a fledgling new police force that has sprung up in this area. So, how well funded are they? Obviously, probably not very much. And are they struggling for resources? Do we have any information about that?
Yeah, they are struggling for resources. One of the guys that we talked to, the spokesperson for the Karenni State Police Force, told us, his name was Bobo, that they have about 10% of the budget that they need for a police force. I think that there are something like 600 officers. 100 of them are former members of the Myanmar State Police that struck as part of this civil disobedience movement, which was a series of protests in opposition to the coup. And so you had 100 officers that were police officers prior to the coup that are kind of forming the core of this new police force. But it's a very kind of fledgling effort, and a lot of the kids that we met, they're not kids, but they're young 20s, and they look younger.
Right.
They're the new recruits, and they're they don't have many resources or much experience as cops. At one station, they only had like one uniform, so most of the people are in civilian clothes, and they share guns, and they're driven around in an old beat-up 1996 Toyota minivan. It's not. So they're trying to make do, but they still have a long way to go.
When you say rebel hospital, I think of quite a crude operation, or huts or dirt floors and things. But then in your piece, you describe labs and X-ray facilities and wards for infectious diseases. Could you paint a picture of what the hospital might actually look like? They took some. There was a hospital in the area before, and they were working from it, but it was bombed twice a year ago. So they made the wise decision to relocate into a jungle location. So they were, I think, more on a sort of a commercial strip in the area, and now they work out of a camp that takes some time to get to, and it's off a main road, and it's very bumpy and wet and muddy and when it rains. They have access to drugs, but it's hard to get. They have to sort of send people out to get them, and sometimes in military-controlled areas. That's difficult. And they don't have top-of-the-line antibiotics, we were told, so if a patient's not responding, then they have to dress him up and try to disguise him or her and send him to a better equipped facility, even if it's controlled by, the military or the government.
A lot of the doctors, especially surgeons who work there, they don't even consider themselves as proper surgeons, simply because they have not gone through the training that one would go through. But the necessity made them to do very complex surgeries. Like when we were there was one guy, they had to do a double amputation to save his life. So the doctor who did it, Dr. Anko Mint, I mean, he himself was saying, I'm not supposed to do this. And then how do they learn to do it? Mostly by doing it. But then now there are other doctors who are a lot more qualified, living abroad, some in London, some in other places. They teach them continuously on through remotely, like how to conduct these things. And they have Starlink connection, so there's internet. So they basically kind of learn as they go, performing these surgeries that's usually kind of like done by senior surgeons.